Virgin. Bitch. Podcast. Inspiring women to overcome social stereotypes and share unique life experiences without fear of being defiantly different. Your hosts, Christopher and Heather. Let's talk, shall we?
It's been argued, does life imitate art, or does art imitate life? When it comes to the emergence of women in art, we hope that life will imitate art. I worked over 20 years in the entertainment field, most of that in the music industry with a major record label. When I started in my career, the industry could not have been more male-dominated, misogynistic, and very proud of its macho image. It was rock and roll. It was hard. It was man. Luckily for me, I arrived at a time of also pioneering women in popular music. Shout out to Tori Amos, Alanis Morissette, Jewel, Biff Naked, and many, many more. It was very clear that they challenged the status quo and changed the tone of the music industry overall. They were not the traditional showgirls with sweet voices marching to the beat of male writers and producers. They were artists who were raw, real, and relentlessly honest about their life and experiences as women and their art. They put that into their art. Working with these women really rubbed off on me in a way that opened my spirit to creating and hosting VIRGIN.BEAUTY.B with Heather. But with women now dominating music like they are, like never before, I can only imagine the impact that female art is having on women's lives. And only a woman can really answer that. So over to you, Heather.
Wow. Thank you, Christopher. And, hearing about Christopher's life in music and these powerhouse women that have, shaped the game, and really did carve the way for so many other women. I grew up definitely with Biff Naked, with Jewel, Alanis Morissette, as speaking to some of the teenage angst I was feeling and anger with the world around me. And then also, some ballads that really kind of hit some of the more sentimental notes of what life was like as we were redefining womanhood and femininity back then. So, Christopher and I were wanting to look into one of the biggest nights in music, which is the Grammy Awards. It's gone through a couple different types of seasons, shall we say. I would say about, 3 years ago, there was a lot of anger towards the Grammys as being racist, not fair to women and some of their achievements. And then there were several major artists that vowed to not come back to the Grammys because it had been so clearly skewed or what have you around racial lines or gender lines. So, of course, Beyonce is a superstar. When you think of superstars and singers, artists, songwriters that have made history, I mean, she's right there at the top of the list. So, I'm not trying to rehash something that people have already seen and revered her for, because she clearly is in a lane all her own on so many different levels. But I think what was so brilliant about this past Grammys is that she finally won Album of the Year after being robbed, arguably for so many years in the past. And not only did she make Album of the Year, and that's an amazing feat in and of itself, but to make it with a country album with Cowboy Carter in a genre that has up until this day been so to dictate what kind of people should be able to play in that arena. And when I say that, I mean that they've made it so that white people should only be able to play in this country arena. And we saw that with the country awards, that she was completely robbed of her just deserves of everything she's made and created in that beautiful, beautiful album. So to see her not only in her own light for what it means for her to break genre categories if, to bust those open, but also all the honoring that she did along the way of Black women who have shaped country music from its origins and bring their story to life, bring their voices into her performance at the halftime show at Christmas. And I really think that what I am loving that I'm seeing with these stars that are women is they're not only using their platform for their own gain, but they're really trying to see their platform as a leverage for other female vocalists or other female artists, or as a platform to be pretty darn political in a way that we haven't seen, I think, ever. I think about the recent election in the US, and more men artists and artists across the board came out in support of one candidate or another. But just to see where women or artists have been muzzled in the past to say, "Ooh, you don't want to tread on that's political sphere. You might lose some of your audience. People might not, go to your music because they're from a different political stripe." So to see this emergence of, women not backing down from that in these big platforms is really something. There's a couple of note for me. One of the biggest ones is Chappell Roan. I mean, people say that she's an overnight success. When you look at her background, it's been, over a decade of tremendous hard work, and she has, it certainly hasn't been an overnight success. It's been an overnight wonder to see her rise into superstardom, but really to see her persevere. And it seems like anytime she can, or anytime she has a platform, she is very vocal, of course, about LGBTQA plus rights as a part of that community herself, very strong on transgender rights, and again, uses her platforms in order to discuss what's happening and what we're fighting for in those spheres. But I found what she said at the Grammys truly interesting, because she said it's about time, like she talked about workers' rights and workers' rights within the industry. She said that artists, once they sign on with a record label, emerging artists was what she was referring to at the time, they don't have access to healthcare coverage, a lot of them. They don't have access to a living wage. And she said that if she was ever to be on the Grammy stage, that would be like one of the first things that she wanted to bring to light, is that these record labels have such a hold on the people that they represent, because these folks are so interested, and so like their whole life has been put towards, making it in the industry, that they often are in a vulnerable situation to get misused, or the power dynamic to not work in their favor. So I'm just wondering if that's something that you saw, Christopher, in your time in the music industry, is how that relationship was around artists being vocal in some of these social justice issues or political issues. Like, have you seen a change?
As again, like when I started in, it was mostly male dominated, and of course, you would have certain artists who would take a stand on certain events happening in the world, or certain things that weren't necessarily at the top of mind when it came to being popular that they would speak out against, but not. I think what women have been able to do is to make it their main platform. Like it's part of their art. It's not a side dish that they go to. That is actually embedded into who they are and how they express themselves, because they have lived a life of not being privileged, so to speak. So that's who they are, and that is going to be expressed in their art. Whereas for men, they have a different motive. It's about being a star, making the money, being the superstar. Things that they may be concerned about in social life didn't necessarily need to be brought into their art per se. In fact, it may even be seen as a detriment to their fame overall. I mean, I have to shout out to groups like U2 and other artists who have made social issues part of their music as well, and have really, really triumphed in doing that. But women in general have always had that baked into what it is that they have to say, and how, because that's how the world has treated them, they've had to overcome so much that it cannot be helped but baked into the message that they put out into the world. As far as, I don't know that male artists get treated any differently as far as working wages and so on and so forth. I'm not sure that males had that privilege. Males had the privilege of a platform that worshipped male artists. So they had an open door to make the kind of money and gain the kind of fame that women didn't have access to. So that became their working wage. They had the fame, they had the money, they had all access to everything that they needed as far as their social, financial needs, demanded. So I'm not sure how that can be baked in or worked into signing with a record label, because I don't know that they see that as their responsibility. Their responsibility is to finance you, get you on the big stage so that you can make more money for them and for yourself. that's their role. So I'm not sure, and I find it fascinating that a woman would take that model and reshape it into, okay, let's make this into like a regular job situation where you take care of my dental, you take care of my, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is fascinating to me. And
It is.
It's amazing a woman has brought that up as the model going forward. That's cool.
I was equally surprised because I think that we do put celebrities and record labels on a pedestal of, well, of course, you'll be able to afford those things because, you're on the big stage and you're bringing in what you think is, a substantial amount of income in order to get your own healthcare coverage through a private company or what have you. But her thoughts, I clearly, and she did articulate that, was around the emerging artists that just isn't the case for. They're still trying to get exposure. So an interesting, and yes, I think very cool conversation to open other people's minds to the prospect of this is still a job, and these people invest their whole lives into making it a livelihood. So pretty darn cool with that. And just for what you were saying with the other pieces, that, these women that you worked with in the music industry, that what they put forward in their activism was part of their identity, or what they put forward in their music. It was part of who they are. And I think that that's, still what we're seeing with these women. It reminds me of, even at this Grammy, Shakira used her platform to talk about advocating for immigrants, which, of course, very bold statement in the USA right now. So that, alongside how Billie Eilish has come out in the queer community, clearly Taylor Swift, like her whole Miss Americana was all about taking the muzzle off and being able to be her full self and not have a record label control how she talks or what she says or how she says it. And it just seems to me that they're using their voices for bigger conversations, that, music isn't just for entertainment, but it is activism, and it is their identity, and it is their power. So it's nice to hear like how women have carved the way for that in the past. And I think that it just continues to reach bigger and bigger heights, to not back down of the box that people try to put us in.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't know that I was being influenced when I worked with these women. However, the way that they expressed themselves, the truth that they expressed in their work and in everything they did, obviously I was influenced by that. I saw women in a space where men had been, and they were standing in that space, not looking for handouts, not looking for favors. They were there with enormous strength to express themselves, not knowing what feedback would be, even within their own industry, but doing it anyway, because that was their truth. I learned a lot just being in the presence of women like that, with the kind of strength that they showed and the honesty that they approached their work every single day. For me, it changed my life, really. I don't think I'd be doing this show had not been influenced by women with that kind of strength in their character.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think the other thing that we also saw out of this Grammys with Charli XCX and with Chappell Roan, they say that Chappell Roan is like a theatrical pop and Charli is hyper electric pop. And typically these are categories that don't get all the way up to the top of the charts and kind of have their time in the sun, in the mainstream arena. So I think there is something to be said about women taking, their artistic expression and really running with it in a way that you can't not look at them. You can't not be intrigued with what they're doing, and bringing these genres that you don't often see on the Grammy stage really into full effect. I mean, Chappell Roan's performance with the Pink Pony, I have never seen a performance quite like that. But she seems, when you see her in interviews, and when she talks about the relationship she had with her father and what that kind of dramatic, sometimes campy, theatrical pop meant to her as being able to have fun and joy in life, even through so many of the hardships that people are facing today in different communities or marginalized groups are facing. To me, that performance really encapsulated that, to kind of break out of the norm and, as they say in the queer community, let your freak flag fly and fly it proudly.
Well, I mean, obviously that's the paradigm shift in music, is that you don't need a label per se in order for you to find your audience anymore. Like, that was the gateway to building an audience and gaining whatever fame and reach that you could imagine. You don't need a label to give you that anymore.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very true. And even with Charli, she had a hit, I don't know, it was over a decade ago, and she came back with a fury over these last couple of years with her Brat album. And I'm like, there's not a woman that I talk to, young, old, it doesn't matter what their age is, that didn't either know what Brat meant or was confused because they had heard their kids saying it or the younger generation saying it. But it was absolutely iconic. And when you talk to younger women that album spoke to, Brat meant, I'm going to try my best here because, I'm talking about Zoomers and I'm a millennial. So this is a younger generation for me. Really feeling my age, Christopher. But that it is like an uninhibited, unapologetic sense of self, and that you deserve your own exploration and you deserve to stand for who you are, and love the way you want to love, and love your body, love your passions, your ambitions. And that if people don't want that for you or respect that in you for what you are, that it doesn't matter, that you'll, that the Brat situation is okay. I could be called a brat. I think there's some parallels even with what people used to call bitch, right?
No, there's no, it is, they're the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because if you talk about bitch the way we talk about bitch, and we propose and promote bitch, there's no difference.
Absolutely. I really do feel like there's such a parallel there. And that's why, I've just loved the conversations that we've had around bitch, because really that is exactly what we've been working towards, is not, yeah. And Brat Summer was the I don't know, the biggest deal. Even when Kamala was running, one of the things that Charli said on her Twitter or on her X was, Kamala is Brat. And that was a huge endorsement for her. So It's amazing to hear, just how pervasive these artists have been. And in absolutely shaping not only pop culture and genres of music, but what that means to women in that generation who also have rippling effects on how that, they talk to their moms about being unapologetically themselves and what it means to not only define their expressions as to what I've said already, but really there is a really big piece to it that's their sexual power, right? Like part of what Charli and so many other artists bring to the table is, what does sexuality mean for women in today's world? So, and I think that's another element that we dive into quite a bit. But it was an amazing. I mean, when I think about the Grammys and also, you saw Kendrick Lamar clean up in a way that, it was really great to see him honored for his amazing artistic mind. Like, he's so talented. And he also made a he said to the Grammys several years ago that he would never be back because they've been so racist in who gets honored for different categories or not. And he was back. He was back for the first time in since that hiatus because it was clear that some big changes were happening, with Album of the Year and I can't pronounce her name because I don't know her very well yet, but I want to get to know her better. I think it's Doechii, and she won Best Rap Album. She's the third woman to ever do so. She had an outstanding performance. She's also part of the LGBTQIA plus community. Another amazing example of somebody whose creativity has pushed the boundaries in a world that sometimes it feels like a lot of boundaries have already been pushed. She took it to a whole new level.
Well, it's interesting. The reason I started off with Life Imitates Art or Art Imitates Life is simply because what we're seeing on stage, as you say, the representation of so many different lifestyles, and is that art setting the stage that can be now transferred into life? If we're accepting it on this stage as art, are we now open in our souls and hearts to accept this in our day-to-day lives? Is that the flow of life? Is it life imitating art?
Oh, I love coming back full circle to that because, I do think that when you think about how life influences art and life and art back into music, that women in music aren't just winning, they're leading and they're challenging the industry and they're setting the cultural tone for what comes next. So, I think that there's a lot of promise in where we're heading next. It was an exciting night to watch, and it's a culmination of all of their hard work for so many years to see that kind of a change and that kind of representation.
Absolutely. Absolutely, especially from my background and knowing these pioneering women. Every time I think of this, I go back to, what year was it? 1963, and Leslie Gore with "You Don't Own Me."
That one just keeps coming back up, doesn't it? That one, it's haunting and it's real. It's almost timeless, it's
It
a
is.
timeless song.
It is. It is absolutely. And yeah, I mean, yes, let's hope that it is life imitating art moving forward, because there's so much to hope for and look forward to when we look at art and where it has changed its tone over the last just few years.
Absolutely. In some of the world that we're in today politically, it honestly was a night of a lot of joy. And one of my favorite quotes right now is that joy deserves as much attention and care as the struggle. It was very moving to see how these women are using the platforms to be that change, to be that identity, to be that power. And I'm really excited, about seeing where they head next and how they keep reshaping the music industry and even life itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks for educating me on what today's world looks like as far as that perspective is concerned. So thank you so much for that.
It's so good to hear about your life in the music industry, Christopher. I always get so much out of our conversations.
And we are going to continue these kinds of conversations as we walk through, and look forward to hearing more about the bitch. We have a lot in the works around that word and entity, and come on back because we got a lot more for you. And you have been listening to
The Virgin,
The Beauty,
and The Brat Bitch.
come on back, bring your friends. We invite you all.